Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We've got a brand new bank that is using Palantir. This was an interesting one that broke yesterday from my guy Bryden. So shout out to Bryden. There is his @ on Twitter. I'll also put it in the description. He found that JPMorgan Chase, which Palantir has a complicated history with, and we're going to talk about that in a second, is now looking for a executive director for a training data platform, which is a product manager who will be using Foundry. This is a job that will pay about $175,000 to $275,000 a year. If we just Command F Palantir, here's what the job overall required qualifications will be. Advanced degree in computer science or related fields with 8 years of product management experience with an understanding of various personas and their journeys. Deep subject matter expertise of Palantir Foundry, e.g. objects, ontologies, model objectives, workspaces, etc. And then it goes a little bit more deeper into the stuff that you need to know. Now, why is this important? And why does this matter? A couple of key things. Number one, this idea of JPMorgan needing you to understand objects, ontologies, model objectives, workspaces, etc. All of these are things that are associated with Palantir, right? Especially the concept of an ontology. The whole goal of Palantir is they take data that is siloed, put it into one place, sort of a common foundation of truth, and then the organization can move forward from there by understanding that. If they're saying for this executive training data platform product manager to make, almost $300,000 a year, you need to be able to truly understand Palantir Foundry. Well, that means they're implementing it into various parts of the company. Strategic purpose of a product manager role is to build, buy, assemble, and develop the needed technical capabilities to organize JPMC data, make it easily accessible and useful to be authorized roles for responsible use. We don't know exactly where they're implementing Palantir Foundry. I would argue it's likely not entirely throughout the entire organization. JPMorgan has hundreds of thousands of employees. It's an international company. So implementing Palantir in JPMorgan India or JPMorgan Korea or, JPMorgan Alabama, right? Because JPMorgan is just everywhere, is probably not happening right now. However, what we do understand is that there are certain offices, certain organizations, certain places inside of the company where they're using Palantir, probably testing it, probably trying to understand what it looks like. And that means other places are using it as well. Because if you're connected, for example, to JPMorgan New York, I'm just going to throw it out there, and the job of the firm-wide chief data office is to enable at-scale development, testing, deployment, and continuous integration and delivery of data and AI ML technologies in order to drive fundamental improvement in the quantity and quality of AI trainings, data sets, et cetera, that's likely not happening throughout the entire organization. But that might be happening in JPMorgan New York. And if it works in JPMorgan New York, and it makes a lot of sense because it's integrated through sales, marketing, finance, data, accounting, etc., that ontology, bringing all that together, then it might start working in JPMorgan India, JPMorgan Korea, et cetera, et cetera. So I do not think that Palantir is being used throughout the entire company across all their industries and all their areas. But if they're talking about the chief data office using and having a firm understanding of how to implement Palantir, specifically Foundry in the context of ontology, then it is a very, very good sign for the company probably piloting Palantir, probably using it to a decent extent, and then eventually being upsold on using it throughout the entire organization if it gives them the desired outcomes that it needs to be. There may be very well JPMorgan New York using Foundry and JPMorgan California using Snowflake, right? And maybe they're testing it out in different ways. I doubt this is being used throughout the entire organization, but if it is, then that's going to be a good thing, and it shows you there's a chance. Now, the reason this is a complicated history with JPMorgan is because Palantir helped JPMorgan spy on employees. This was an article that came out April 19th, 2018, and this is what actually led JPMorgan to leaving Palantir a while back. So Bloomberg published an expose on Thursday that in part reported on how data firm Palantir effectively used JPMorgan as a testing ground to develop a surveillance analytics tool for the financial sector. The tool reportedly previewed private information like GPS locations and browser histories to keep tabs on the bank's employees. Now, Palantir didn't do this. There were some bad actors that got fired in JPMorgan because they figured out, I think it was either some leaks or a couple of holes or different ways to manipulate Palantir's operating system. Now, this was about 5 years ago. A lot of things have changed. Palantir has gotten a lot better at being able to do this stuff. Palantir lost them as a client a long time ago because of these things. And, this is a good reason why Palantir wasn't public and they got their act together and they got things figured out. But it just shows you how valuable a software like Palantir was. And if it gets into the wrong hands, then it can do some bad things. According to Bloomberg, the company began working with JPMorgan almost 10 years ago to assist the bank's insider threat group, which at the time was led by a former Secret Service agent named Peter Kavicha. Palantir was developing a product for the corporate world called Metropolisis Metropolis. Bloomberg describes how Kavici's team made use of Metropolis. They said, aided by as many as 124 deployed engineers, we all know who they are, from the data mining company Palantir, JPMorgan engaged in 2009. Kavici's groups vacuumed up emails and browser histories, GPS locations, and companies shoot smartphones, printer and download activity, and transcripts of digitally recorded phone conversations. Palantir software aggregated, searched, sorted, and analyzed all these records, surfacing keywords and patterns of behavior that they have flagged for potential abuse of corporate assets, which is the whole point of pattern recognition and fraud mitigation. Palantir's algorithm, for example, alerted the insider threat team when an employee started badging into work later than usual, a sign of potential disgruntlement that would trigger further scrutiny and possible physical surveillance after hours by bank security personnel. So Palantir says, we are aware that powerful technology can be abused, and we spend a lot of time and energy making sure our products are used for the forces of good. And again, this was a whole thing that happened a long time ago. It wasn't necessarily Palantir causing these problems. What the problem was is that the proper guardrails and security infrastructure that needed to be in place to make sure stuff like this doesn't happen in the context of people not having access to certain types of data, or Palantir software itself not gaining access to certain types of data, wasn't as good as it is today. And as a result of that, in 2018, that led to some controversies. So the point of why I'm bringing this up is because JPMorgan had a relationship with Palantir going back to 2009. Okay, they've known these guys for a long time. In 2018, as they were developing these products from 2009 to 2015, some things went south because some people manipulated the use of the data, the product, etc., and that ended up being bad for Palantir. Now it looks like, based on this job application, and I've go through a lot of job applications, I haven't seen JPMorgan Chase as looking for Palantir Foundry. I've seen AT&T, I've seen United, I've seen Facebook, I've seen Roblox. I've done video on these a long time ago. I've seen a lot of companies saying, hey, you need to be skilled in Palantir Foundry. This job application in particular, to me, signifies, number one, that they're ready to get into another working relationship with Palantir. And maybe it's been going on for the past couple months, but we haven't known as outside shareholders because Palantir doesn't disclose their customer list. So this has probably been happening for a while, but now it's finally coming to light because we're actually getting these job descriptions where people are saying you have to have a deep understanding of Palantir Foundry if you want to work on the data team as a chief executive inside of JPMorgan. That to me means Palantir is starting to get integrated across a lot of areas in the company, which is very important. Number two, it means that Karp has been able to sell JPMorgan on actually using their products for other things, even though the initial versions of their products got manipulated and didn't work out. They were building a very niche product. They're like, hey, we know things didn't go the best last time, but you should still kind of think of using our products, and our products are good and we can save you a lot of money. And JPMorgan is probably deciding to do that. And number three, this overall means that a lot of the stuff we're seeing in terms of fraud mitigation, AI and ML applications to help banks become stronger and better, and the overall modernization of how every industry is going to change, especially in the context of financial industries. What we saw with Silicon Valley Bank collapse, FRC, only proved JPMorgan's not going to collapse because it's too big of a company, but you need those proper guardrails in place, because if you can pattern recognize and see that, hey, this bad thing is happening, we should probably mitigate it by doing something else before the entire bank collapses, well, that's a data problem. And that's a data problem that can only be solved and enhanced and accentuated with artificial intelligence and machine learning, because every other competitor is doing the same, so you need a competitive advantage. And that's where Palantir plays a role. And so if we're seeing an entire industry change within our eyes, every industry change within our eyes, finance is no different. JPMorgan is one of the leading finance companies on the entire planet. It only makes sense that they're integrating Palantir within their workflows to operationalize them, to help them get a better understanding of their data. And again, the history between Palantir and JPMorgan hasn't been the best, but I think that's okay, because at the end of the day, they took some risks, things didn't work out, some things did, and if they're back to using them, then that is a good thing for Palantir. I would also be interested to see how this implicates other banks. I know I saw a bank listing for Bank of America with Palantir back in 2022, early during that time. I wonder, if Palantir is able to show substantial changes in JPMorgan in terms of just product enhancement, reduction of costs, increase of revenue, whatever metrics they need to show. What does that mean for other banks that could potentially use Palantir software as well? Because, obviously the entire banking industry is trying to solve big data problems, whether it's fraud mitigation or figuring out how to underwrite loans, all these types of things, and Palantir can probably play a role in that. So those are my thoughts. A new bank using Palantir Foundry, JPMorgan. We've had a relationship with them for a while. Seems like they're back. Let's see where it goes from here. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. I'll see you in the next one.